Eric Solvin had always considered himself an ordinary man, with a life that was far removed from the affairs of royalty. As a technician on Cerulia, a barren mining world orbiting a dim sun, his days were spent in the mechanical rhythm of work repairing faulty drilling units, keeping the ancient ore extractors operational, and making sure the mining colony ran without disruption. It was a hard, unremarkable life, but a steady one. The Galactic Council, the sprawling body of governance that presided over the galaxy's order, was little more than a distant name to him, a thing of legend and news feeds, existing light years away from his reality. Yet everything changed the moment the courier arrived. The day's dust storm had just begun to settle when Eric saw the metallic glint of a ship descending through the thick haze. He squinted against the orange-tinted glare as the vessel, a sleek, silver courier ship, touched down in the square. Such ships rarely visited Cerulia, and when they did, they were usually collecting mineral shipments or delivering updated colonial protocols. But this ship was different. Its surface gleamed with a polished sheen, unmarred by the grime that coated every surface on this dusty world. And emblazoned on its hull was the insignia of Lyriath's royal house, a white crescent moon, cradled by a crown of stars. Eric was still wiping sweat from his brow when the hatch hissed open, and an androform emerged, tall, lithe, its movements unnaturally smooth, with a face too symmetrical to be human. Its gaze fixed on him immediately, and it approached with a directness that made the small crowd gathered in the square fall silent. Eric Solvin, the androform, announced, its voice a calm, mechanical monotone. "You are hereby summoned under the authority of the last will and testament of Queen Selinara of Lyriath. Please present your identification for verification. The words struck him like a blow. Queen Selinara. The name hung in the air, conjuring images of a distant, elegant ruler whose presence had graced the Holnos many times, yet never touched the reality of his existence. Her death had been announced only days before, unexpected and shrouded in rumors of foul play. But what could she possibly want with him, a mere technician? There must be a mistake, Eric stammered. I have no connection to Lyriath or the Queen. The androform's expression did not change, its eyes pale blue, and luminous regarded him with a cold, indifferent patience. There is no mistake, it replied. Please present your identification. With hands trembling from a mixture of confusion and apprehension, Eric retrieved his ident chip and handed it to the androform. The device blinked twice, scanning his biometrics before displaying a green confirmation. Without a word, the courier extended a scroll towards him, sealed with a deep blue wax bearing the imprint of Lyriath's royal insignia. By the decree of Queen Selinara, you have been named as the guardian of Princess Leora of Lyriath, the androform stated, its voice devoid of emotion as it recited the words. You are required to present yourself before the Galactic Council within 10 standard cycles to formalize the guardianship. The will is legally binding, and non-compliance will be considered a refusal of the inheritance. The scroll felt impossibly heavy in Eric's hands, as though the wax seal alone weighed more than any piece of mining equipment he had ever lifted. The words echoed in his mind, guardian of Princess Leora. The Queen's daughter. An heir to one of the most powerful planets in the Galactic Empire. Why him? He glanced up, half expecting the androform to clarify the absurdity of it all, but it merely turned and walked back towards the ship, its purpose completed. The crowd that had gathered murmured in hushed voices, their gazes shifting between Eric and the departing ship, which was already lifting off, leaving behind a swirl of dust. A sense of unreality washed over him as he stared at the scroll, still sealed. He had never been closer to royalty than watching distant broadcasts from his dusty quarters, and now a queen had apparently named him as the guardian of her daughter. Eric took refuge in his workshop, away from prying eyes and curious whispers. The scroll lay on the workbench before him, the blue seal still unbroken, mocking him with its silence. He ran a hand through his tousled hair, the weight of the moment pressing down. The thought of a mistake, some administrative error, kept resurfacing. And yet, there was only one way to find out. He took a small blade and carefully broke the seal, peeling back the elegant parchment to reveal the Queen's last words. To Eric Solvin. You are not a man of great means or station, but I know you are a man of great character. I entrust the care of my daughter, Princess Leora, to you. I chose you not because of any royal blood or title, but for reasons you may not yet understand. There are forces at play far greater than either of us, and in time you will see that this task has fallen to you by necessity, not chance. Protect her, guide her, and keep her safe from those who would use her as a tool for their ambitions. With this inheritance comes a duty to uncover the truth. There is much at stake, more than you yet realize. You will soon find that there are no coincidences in the galaxy's design. Selenara of Lyriath. Eric read the letter again, searching for some hidden meaning, some clue as to why the Queen had chosen him, a man whose life had barely touched the outskirts of the galactic stage. But there was nothing more than the haunting, cryptic words: protect her, guide her, discover the truth. The reality of his situation slowly sank in. If he were to be the guardian of a royal princess, he would need to travel to Lyriath, present himself to the Galactic Council, and somehow justify a claim that even he didn't fully understand. He felt like a man who had been handed the keys to a starship without any knowledge of how to pilot it. And then there was Princess Leora herself, a girl he had never met, whose life had just been shattered by the loss of her mother. What would she think of him? Would she see him as nothing more than an intruder in her life, or worse, a pawn in some unseen game? The day of the council hearing arrived far too quickly. The trip to Lyriath was a blur of transit gates and shuttle docks, of drifting in and out of sleep during the long journey. When his ship finally descended through the planet's atmosphere, he was greeted by a world of breathtaking beauty, vast green valleys, and shimmering crystal spires that reached towards the twin suns. It was a far cry from Cerulea's barren rock, a place where wealth and power seemed woven into the very fabric of existence. The council hall itself was a testament to Lyriath's grandeur, an immense domed chamber lined with columns carved from rare minerals, each gleaming like starlight. Representatives from every corner of the galaxy filled the tiered rows, robed in their symbols of office and speaking in hushed tones that carried an air of solemnity and suspicion. The atmosphere was stifling, the weight of judgment palpable. Eric stood alone at the center of the chamber, his pulse thudding in his ears. The speaker, a tall Lethean with skin that glowed faintly like polished quartz, raised his hand to call the session to order. "We are gathered to discuss the matter of the guardianship of Princess Leora," the speaker began, his voice resonating with the practiced calm of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "Eric Solvin, you stand before this council as the named guardian by the last will of Queen Selenara. The council demands to know why she chose you." Eric cleared his throat, feeling the eyes of 100 dignitaries boring into him. "I wish I could give you a clear answer," he admitted, his voice steady, despite the tension in his chest. "The Queen's will came as a surprise to me, too, but I can tell you that I will honor her wishes and protect the princess. I may not be a noble, but I will not turn my back on this duty." A ripple of murmurs followed his words, some tinged with doubt, others with interest. One of the representatives, an aristocrat with a bejeweled mantle, stood to speak. "Protection is only one aspect of guardianship," he said with a sneer. "A man of your background is ill-equipped to understand the intricacies of royal duty and galactic politics. How can you claim to safeguard the future of Lyriath's only heir?" Eric's jaw tightened. "I may not know much about politics," he replied, "but I know about loyalty. I was chosen because the Queen believed in something beyond titles and lineage. I intend to find out why." "Enough," the speaker interjected, raising his hand for silence. "The council will permit provisional guardianship, pending an investigation into Queen Selenara's death and a review of the will's circumstances. But know this, Eric Solvin, your position is tenuous. Any misstep will see the guardianship revoked." As the session ended, Eric felt a mix of relief and dread. The immediate danger was averted, but the path ahead was filled with uncertainty. He had a duty now, a purpose he had not sought but could not deny. And somewhere within the labyrinthine halls of power, secrets lay buried, secrets that would force him to confront not only the forces that shaped the galaxy but also his own forgotten past. For now, the only certainty was the task before him to earn the trust of a princess who did not know him, and to unravel the enigma of a queen's final wish. The sky over Lyriath deepened to a twilight blue as Eric and Leora left the council hall, the cool evening air brushing against their skin. The planet's famed crystal spires gleamed in the distance, illuminated by the setting suns. Their beauty felt like an ironic backdrop to the situation. Eric had barely managed to secure provisional guardianship, and Leora's fate remained uncertain, hanging by a thread of royal politics. They walked side by side, yet a gulf seemed to stretch between them, neither knowing what to say. Eric could sense the tension in Leora's posture, the way her hands remained clenched at her sides, her gaze unfocused. She had spoken on his behalf in the council, Yet he could tell there was still a barrier between them, one built from grief, uncertainty, and a lifetime spent far above the world he came from. "Did you believe what you said in there?" she asked at last, her voice soft but sharp with curiosity. "That my mother's choice wasn't random?" Eric hesitated, weighing his words. "I don't think Queen Selenara did anything without a reason, but I can't pretend I understand why she chose me." Yet he glanced at her, gauging her reaction. She could have picked anyone, someone with experience, with connections. There's a piece missing, something she didn't want the council to know. Leora's lips tightened into a thin line. Or maybe she was desperate. There was a coldness in her tone, a hint of bitterness. After all, I doubt the council would have respected her wishes even if she'd chosen someone with the right bloodline. "That's possible," Eric admitted, "but it doesn't change the fact that we have to find out what she was protecting you from." He looked over at her, his expression softening. "And why she thought I could help." They made their way through Lyriath's winding streets, leaving behind the polished grandeur of the upper district. Here, in the lower levels, the city's splendor gave way to the vivid hustle of ordinary life. Neon lights flickered over narrow alleys, the air was filled with laughter and the lively chatter of market vendors hawking their wares. It was a far cry from the imposing halls of power they had just left behind, and Eric felt a small measure of relief. He guided Leora to a modest inn tucked away from the main thoroughfare, its entrance marked by a simple holographic sign that read "Sanctuary" in elegant script. He had chosen the place for its anonymity. No one would think to look for them here. The inn catered to travelers from all over the galaxy, those who preferred to keep their comings and goings discreet. 2 rooms, Eric told the holographic hostess, offering his ident chip under a false name. As they climbed the narrow stairway to their rooms, Leora shot him a sidelong glance. "You're using an alias. You think we're being watched?" "Better safe than sorry," Eric replied. "The council won't sit back and wait for us to find answers. They'll be watching, waiting for any excuse to discredit my claim." Inside their adjoining rooms, Eric settled by the small window, peering out at the chaotic glow of the city below. He wasn't sure where to begin, but there was no time to waste. He turned his attention to the documents on his holoscreen, combing through every record he could find related to Queen Selenara's last days, her allies, adversaries, and the sudden shifts in the council's power dynamics. One name kept surfacing: Lord Talion. His frequent visits to Lyriath in the weeks before the Queen's death, and his long-standing rivalry with the royal line painted a picture too conspicuous to ignore. Eric's search grew more unsettling when he discovered old whispers that Talion had been courting an alliance with several influential families through secret trade deals. The Queen had opposed such alliances, fearing they would destabilize the region and threaten Lyriath's sovereignty. Yet, the more he uncovered, the clearer it became that Talion was not working alone. A quiet knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Eric opened it to find Leora standing there, her features pale in the soft glow of the holoscreen. She wore a simple, travel-worn outfit that made her seem more like an ordinary girl than a princess. Her eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights. "I couldn't rest," she confessed, stepping inside. "The more I think about it, the more I wonder if my mother knew she was in danger. She always seemed so calm, but there was something different in her the last time I saw her." "What do you mean?" Eric asked, turning off the holoscreen. "Different how?" Leora sat down on the edge of the bed, her gaze unfocused as she recalled the memory. She was preoccupied, almost as if she were saying goodbye, though she never said it outright. Her voice faltered, and she closed her eyes as if trying to hold back a wave of emotion. "She told me not to worry, that everything was under control. But now, I can't shake the feeling that she was preparing for the worst." Eric took a seat across from her, feeling the pieces of a puzzle fall into place. "If she knew something was coming, it would explain why she named me as your guardian," he said quietly. "She needed someone outside the political sphere, someone the council couldn't easily manipulate." Leora met his gaze, her expression hardening with a renewed sense of purpose. "Then we need to find out what she knew. If someone on the council had a hand in her death, we can't let them go unpunished." Eric nodded. "We start with Lord Talion. His name keeps coming up in the records, and his recent activities are suspicious. I'm certain he's tied to this somehow." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the pendant he had found among the documents, a small, silver emblem engraved with intricate symbols. "There's also this," he said, handing it to Leora. The inscription is in an ancient Lyrian dialect. It says, "To he who guards the light, follow the path of the forgotten. Leora's eyes widened as she took the pendant. This is a saying from the Guardians of the Light, an old sect that was supposed to protect Lyriath's royal line during times of crisis. Her fingers traced the markings, as if seeking answers from the cold metal. They disappeared over a century ago. Their name hasn't been spoken in ages. Eric felt a shiver run down his spine. What if they didn't disappear, he suggested. What if they went underground, hiding to protect a secret? A secret worth killing, for Leora finished, her voice barely above a whisper. She stood up, the pendant still clasped in her hand. We need to know more. If the Guardians were real, and if they were protecting something my mother uncovered, then this might be the key to everything. The search took them to the depths of the city, to a forgotten library nestled within Lyriath's oldest district. The building was a relic from a bygone era, its stone walls adorned with faded carvings, and the air inside thick with the scent of ancient paper and dust. As they ventured deeper, Eric couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He glanced over his shoulder more than once, but there was only silence and shadow. Rows of manuscripts and holocrystals filled the shelves, each one containing fragments of history long obscured by time. They began their search in the section dedicated to Lyrian legends, where the Guardians of the Light were mentioned in hushed tones, always as protectors, but never revealing what they had sworn to guard. It was Leora who found the clue, tucked away in an old journal written by a former royal advisor. Here she said, pointing to a passage. It mentions a secret known only to the Guardians, a hidden artifact said to be capable of revealing the true heir to the throne. The artifact was last seen over a century ago, but the journal hints that the Queen's ancestors safeguarded it before the Guardians vanished. Eric's heart raced as the realization hit him. If your mother discovered this artifact, it would explain why she needed someone she could trust, someone outside the royal circles. Leora's grip tightened on the journal. We need to find it, she declared. If the artifact can prove my right to the throne, then it's not just my inheritance at stake, it's the future of Lyriath. As they left the library, Eric caught sight of a figure watching them from a distance, a cloaked shape that disappeared the moment he turned. The sense of being followed returned, stronger than before. We're not alone, he whispered to Leora, his tone urgent. Someone's tracking us. Leora's eyes darted around, searching for any sign of the pursuer. Who would know we're here? I don't know, Eric admitted, but if they're after us, then we're closer to the truth than we thought. They quickened their pace, slipping through the narrow alleys toward their hidden inn. As the shadows deepened and the city's noise faded behind them, Eric realized the depth of the danger they faced. It wasn't just a matter of unraveling a mystery anymore, they were now targets in a deadly game, pursued by forces that would stop at nothing to keep the truth buried. But the Queen's last wish had set them on this path, and there was no turning back. Not now, not with the stakes so high and the legacy of a planet resting on their shoulders. As they reached the sanctuary of the inn, Eric knew one thing with certainty: they would have to confront the darkness of Lyriath's past to secure its future. Morning light spilled over Lyriath's crystalline towers, casting rainbows through the spires. Eric stared out the window of the inn, his mind racing. Their leads hinted at a secret hidden in Lyriath's past, yet every discovery seemed to unearth even more questions. He knew their time was running short, their enemies would not remain idle. Behind him, Leora sat at a small table, poring over the old journal she had found in the library. Her face was tense with concentration, her silver hair falling loosely over her shoulders. Eric could see the frustration in her every movement, the way her fingers tapped against the table when she paused to think. Any progress, he asked, breaking the silence. Not much, she replied, her voice edged with frustration. The journal has vague references to the Guardians of the Light and mentions an artifact they protected, but nothing specific. It's as if someone went to great lengths to erase them from history. Or they erased themselves, Eric suggested, walking over to the table. If they were truly protecting something dangerous, they may have chosen to disappear. Leora's eyes narrowed. You think they're still out there? It's possible, he said, but we'll need more than old stories to prove it. We should focus on what we know for sure. Talion is connected to all this. His sudden interest in your mother's political decisions, his dealings with the Free Traders Guild, something doesn't add up. Then we find him, Leora said, her tone firmer now. We need to know what he's hiding. Later that morning, Eric and Leora made their way through the capital's bustling streets, heading toward the diplomatic quarter. Rather than risk another direct encounter with the council, they sought the aid of someone who knew the inner workings of Lyriathian politics, Lady Seraphine Alar. With her unpredictable alliances and a knack for playing both sides, Seraphine could be a valuable ally or a dangerous enemy, but Eric knew they had to take the risk. Her estate stood at the edge of the diplomatic district, surrounded by marble walls and shaded gardens. A guard androform stationed at the gate regarded them with an expressionless gaze. "State your business," it said, voice echoing slightly from its metallic throat. "Tell Lady Seraphine that Eric Solvin and Princess Leora request an audience," Eric said. The androform scanned their ident chips before nodding once. "Wait here." Moments later, the gates opened, and a tall woman with copper hair strode forward, her gown shimmering as though alive. She studied them with keen, amused eyes. "Princess Leora." She greeted with a slight bow, then turned to Eric, and the commoner turned guardian. "To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" "We need information," Eric replied, cutting straight to the point. "It's about Queen Selenara's death." Seraphine's expression shifted ever so slightly, the amusement fading. "A dangerous topic," she murmured. "The council would prefer that chapter remain closed." "It can't remain closed," Leora interjected. "My mother's death was no accident. If someone on the council was involved, I need to know who." The edge in her voice seemed to intrigue Seraphine. "Very well," she said, motioning them inside. "Let's see if we can stir the hornet's nest." The drawing room of Lady Seraphine's estate was lavish, filled with delicate sculptures and intricate tapestries. She led them to a set of high-backed chairs, offering wine as if they were here for a casual chat. Yet her gaze remained sharp, taking in every detail. "Start talking," she said. "What is it you wish to know?" Eric spoke first. "We have reason to believe that Lord Talion was involved in the Queen's death. He had connections to the Free Traders Guild and conducted private meetings in the weeks before she died. What do you know about this?" Seraphine swirled her wine glass thoughtfully. "Talion. An ambitious man, always seeking more influence," she said. "The Queen kept his ambitions in check, but with her gone, he's been expanding his reach. The Traders Guild? Yes, I heard whispers of their meetings. Not exactly the company a respectable council member would keep." "Why would he deal with smugglers?" Leora pressed. "Information," Seraphine replied smoothly. "The Guild is not just a smuggling ring. They specialize in secrets buying, selling, acquiring. If Talion was dealing with them, he might have been seeking something far more valuable than contraband. Or perhaps—" She paused, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous curiosity. He was trying to find something or someone. Eric leaned forward, his tone low. "Does the name Guardians of the Light mean anything to you?" A faint smile crossed Seraphine's lips. "Ah, now you're digging into ancient history. The Guardians were once a respected sect, protectors of Lyriath's royal family. They supposedly disbanded a century ago. But some believe they never truly vanished. Rumor has it they were safeguarding a relic of great importance, an artifact connected to Lyriath's succession." Leora glanced at Eric, then back to Seraphine. "What kind of artifact?" "Stories vary," Seraphine said, her tone dismissive, though her eyes were watchful. "A weapon, a source of knowledge, a key to something hidden. Take your pick. The point is, whatever it is, its existence poses a threat to the current power structure. If your mother had anything to do with it, that could explain why she was targeted." Eric frowned. "And if Talion is after it, then he's not acting alone." "No," Seraphine agreed, setting down her glass. "He has allies, though he keeps them well hidden. The council is not as united as it appears. You've seen the factions at play, the reformists and the traditionalists, but there's a third group lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike." Leora's jaw tightened. "And where do you stand?" Seraphine's smile returned, this time sharper. "I stand with myself, Princess. But our interests might align, at least for now. I'll tell you this much: Talion recently acquired a star map from the Guild, a chart showing the location of ancient ruins in uncharted space. I doubt he plans to explore them for historical research." Eric exchanged a glance with Leora. "The Guardian's artifact to be there," he said quietly. "If we get to those ruins first, we might find answers." Leaving Seraphine's estate, Eric and Leora were more determined than ever. They made their way to a less reputable district, seeking further information about the Free Traders Guild. The search led them to a seedy tavern where smugglers and mercenaries traded stories and coin. Inside, Eric spotted a man with a silver armband, a mark of the Guild. He approached cautiously, signaling Leora to stay back. "I'm looking for a map," Eric said, sliding a few credits across the table. "One sold to Lord Talion." The smuggler's gaze flickered with interest. "Talion? He paid a lot for that map," he replied. "Must be something valuable in those coordinates." "Did you keep a copy?" Eric asked. "Why would I do that?" the smuggler replied, though a sly grin crept onto his face. "Of course I might have a spare for the right price." Eric offered a larger sum, and the smuggler produced a small data chip. "There's more," the man said as he handed it over. The map wasn't complete. There were encrypted coordinates, separate from the main chart. "We didn't crack the code, but if you're going after whatever's out there, you'd better be ready." Eric nodded, pocketing the chip. "We will be." As they left the tavern, the city's lights began to dim, signaling the onset of night. The encrypted coordinates weighed heavily on Eric's mind, but the journey ahead felt more dangerous than ever. He glanced at Leora, who had remained quiet since their meeting with Seraphine. "We have to go after the ruins," she said, her voice steady. "Whatever's out there, it's the only way to understand why my mother was killed." Eric nodded, his resolve hardening. "We'll leave as soon as we can. But we need to be careful. If Talion is after the artifact, he won't hesitate to stop us." As they set their course for the uncharted regions of space, Eric could feel the conspiracy tightening around them. The ruins might hold the answers they sought, or they could be walking into a trap set by the very forces that had driven the Queen to her grave. But there was no turning back now. They were closing in on the truth, and it was time to confront whatever lay hidden in the darkness of Lyriath's history. One thing was certain: the deeper they ventured, the more dangerous the game would become, and they were playing for the highest stakes imaginable: the future of Lyriath itself. Lyriath's twin moons hung low in the sky, casting pale light over the capital's spires as Eric and Leora made their way to the spaceport. The city seemed quieter than usual, as if holding its breath in anticipation. The encrypted coordinates from the smuggler's map burned in Eric's mind. If the ruins held the answers they needed, then they had no time to waste. They would head to the outer reaches, where forgotten worlds and ancient secrets lay buried in silence. The ship, Starlance, awaited them, a sleek craft built for speed and maneuverability. As they boarded, Eric's thoughts lingered on the precariousness of their mission. The encrypted data hinted at a place far beyond the Galactic Empire's borders, where law and order were mere suggestions. He knew that venturing so far from Lyriath meant leaving behind what little protection the Council's laws offered. Here, in the wild reaches of space, they would be alone. Leora joined him in the cockpit, her expression a blend of determination and unease. "Do you think we're ready for this?" she asked, buckling herself into the co-pilot's seat. Eric powered up the ship's engines, their hum vibrating through the hull. "We have to be," he replied. "If we don't find what's out there, then we'll never understand why your mother died or what she was trying to protect." She nodded, but her gaze remained distant, fixed on the stars beyond the viewport. "Then let's go," she said quietly, "before we're followed." With a final check of the navigation systems, Eric guided the Starlance upward, breaking through Lyriath's atmosphere and into the cold expanse of space. The ship streaked past the outer defense grid and accelerated, its engines flaring as they jumped to faster than light speed. The stars elongated into brilliant lines, then faded into the swirling patterns of hyperspace. Their destination was a region of space known as the Nebular Fringe, a chaotic expanse filled with drifting asteroids, gas clouds, and the remains of shattered worlds. It was an area seldom charted, even by the most ambitious explorers. Eric knew it was the perfect hiding place for a relic like the one the Guardians supposedly protected. Hours passed as they approached the coordinates, and the journey began to take its toll. The turbulence from the nearby nebula rattled the ship's hull, and the shimmering gases outside obscured their view of space. Eric adjusted the stabilizers while Leora monitored the readings, her face tense with concentration. "Something feels off," she said, glancing at the scanner's display. "The readings show erratic energy spikes. It's like the entire area is in flux." "It's the nebula," Eric replied. "The gases create interference. It'll mess with the scanners, make it hard to get clear readings." "Maybe," she said, her eyes narrowing at the display. "But it feels like something's interfering on purpose." Before Eric could respond, the ship's proximity alarm blared. A massive object loomed ahead, obscured by the swirling nebula until it was almost too close to avoid. He yanked the controls, sending the starlings into a sharp bank. The ship's engine strained against the sudden maneuver, and the hull groaned as they narrowly avoided the obstacle, a derelict vessel, its hull covered in dark scorch marks and drifting lifelessly through space. "What is that?" Leora gasped, gripping the edge of her seat. "A warship," Eric replied grimly, eyeing the massive wreck. Or it used to be. He adjusted the scanners, trying to get a clearer look. The ship was an old model, the kind used by mercenary fleets decades ago, but its condition suggested it hadn't been in service for a long time. "There are no life signs," Leora said, reading the data. "It's been adrift for years." "Then why did it almost feel like it was waiting for us?" Eric muttered under his breath. He guided the starlings past the derelict and toward the coordinates. The ruins lay on a desolate moon at the edge of the nebula, its surface a cracked wasteland with jagged cliffs and deep craters. Eric set the ship down on a narrow plateau, its landing strut sinking slightly into the moon's dusty surface. The ancient structures loomed ahead, dark silhouettes against the eerie glow of the nebula. Their architecture was strange and alien, unlike anything he had seen before, with twisting spires and angular arches that defied conventional design. As they disembarked, a chill seemed to permeate the air. Leora shivered, pulling her cloak tighter around her shoulders. "This place, it feels wrong," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Eric drew his blaster, keeping it at the ready as they approached the largest of the structures. "Stay close," he instructed. "If the Guardians were here, they left this place behind a long time ago." The entrance was marked by a massive archway, its surface etched with intricate glyphs that glowed faintly, pulsing with a dim blue light. Leora studied the symbols, tracing them with her fingers. "These are Lyrian," she said in surprise. "But they're written in an older dialect, one we stopped using centuries ago." "Can you read it?" Eric asked. "Some of it," she replied, squinting at the glyphs. "It's a warning, something about a keeper of knowledge and a gate to the void. I'm not sure what it means." Eric's gaze swept over the ruins, unease prickling at the back of his neck. The place felt less like a relic and more like a trap. "Let's keep moving," he said, gesturing toward a passageway that led deeper into the structure. The corridor stretched into darkness, lit only by the faint glow of the glyphs. The air grew colder as they ventured farther in, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. Eric's grip tightened on his blaster as they entered a large chamber, its ceiling arching high above. At its center stood a massive obelisk, carved from a dark crystalline material that seemed to absorb the light around it. Leora approached the obelisk, her breath visible in the cold air. "This is it," she whispered, reaching out to touch the surface. "The artifact. I can feel it." Before Eric could react, the chamber's entrance slammed shut behind them. The glyphs lining the walls flared with a harsh red light, casting the room in an eerie glow. Eric spun around, his blaster raised, as shadowy figures emerged from the darkness, cloaked shapes that moved with an unnatural grace. Their faces were obscured, but their voices echoed through the chamber in a language he did not recognize. "Who are you?" Leora demanded, stepping back from the obelisk. "What do you want?" One of the figures spoke, its voice a harsh whisper. "We are the Guardians, the keepers of the old truths." It raised a gloved hand, and the air seemed to vibrate with energy. "You have come seeking knowledge, but knowledge has a price." Eric stepped forward, keeping his weapon trained on the nearest figure. "We're not here for a fight," he said. "We need answers about the artifact, about Queen Selenara. What happened to her?" The Guardians exchanged glances, and the one who had spoken replied, "The Queen uncovered secrets that should have remained buried. She sought to wield the power of the ancient relic, believing it could secure her daughter's future." Its gaze shifted to Leora. "But such power is not meant for mortal hands. It is a key to a gate that should never be opened." Leora's eyes widened. "A gate to the void," she whispered. "The inscription outside it spoke of this." "The gate is a doorway to a realm beyond our understanding," the Guardian continued. "The Queen believed it held the power to reshape the galaxy, to end the chaos that plagues the Empire. But in seeking to control it, she invited disaster." Eric glanced at Leora, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. "Talion must have known about the gate," he said. "That's why he wanted the map. He's not just after the artifact, he's trying to open the gate. If he does," the Guardian said, its voice growing graver, "he will unleash forces that no one can control." Leora's expression hardened with resolve. Then we need to stop him. Tell us how. The Guardian hesitated, then extended a hand toward the obelisk. The key is within the artifact, it said, but to access its power, you must be willing to face the truth it reveals about the past and about yourselves. The moment Leora placed her hand on the obelisk, a blinding light enveloped the chamber. Images flashed before Eric's eyes, visions of an ancient war, of beings who wielded the power of the gate to shape reality itself. He saw the queen, standing before the obelisk, desperation etched on her face as she sought a way to protect her daughter. And then he saw Talion, his ambitions burning bright, his hand reaching for the same power. When the light faded, Eric found himself on his knees, gasping for breath. Leora stood beside him, her face pale but resolute. "We know what we have to do," she said, her voice steady. "We have to destroy the gate before Talion reaches it." Eric nodded, rising to his feet. The Guardian's warning echoed in his mind, but there was no time for hesitation. As they made their way back toward the ship, he knew that the path ahead would lead them into the heart of darkness. The fate of Lyriath and perhaps the galaxy hung in the balance. They would have to face Talion and confront the power he sought to unleash, knowing that the cost of failure was far greater than death. The true battle was only beginning. The Starlance hurtled through hyperspace, its engines straining as it raced toward the coordinates revealed by the Guardians. The final destination lay in an uncharted sector known as the Maelstrom Rift, a volatile region where gravity anomalies tore at the fabric of space itself. It was a place few dared to navigate, and fewer still returned from. For Eric and Leora, there was no turning back. They had to reach the gate before Talion did. The stakes were nothing less than the fate of Lyriath and the galaxy beyond. In the cockpit, Leora's expression was one of cold determination. Eric could see the tension in the set of her jaw, the way her hands gripped the armrests. "We need to be ready," she said, her voice steady but edged with urgency. "If Talion reaches the gate first, he'll use its power to reshape the galaxy on his terms." Eric nodded, his gaze fixed on the approaching starfield. "And if that happens, there's no telling what he'll unleash. We have to stop him from opening the gate." The navigation console blinked, signaling their arrival. Eric disengaged the hyperdrive, and the ship dropped out of hyperspace into the chaotic expanse of the Maelstrom Rift. The view outside was a swirl of twisting energy fields, glowing dust clouds and debris from shattered moons. The sensors flared with warnings as gravitational disturbances tugged at the ship. "There," Leora said, pointing at the distant silhouette of an ancient structure. It loomed over a fragment of a broken world, a dark, angular construct that pulsed with a faint, malevolent light. The gate. Eric steered the Starlance toward the ruin, adjusting the stabilizers to counter the gravitational flux. As they drew closer, he saw other ships converging on the same location, small, fast-moving vessels darting like predators. His heart sank as he recognized the sleek lines and dark hulls. "Talion's mercenaries," he muttered. "He's already here." The comm crackled to life, a voice cutting through the static. "This is Captain Rain of Talion's fleet. Power down your engines and surrender the princess, or we will destroy your vessel." Eric's hands tightened on the controls. "Looks like we're doing this the hard way." "Let's make it count," Leora said, her eyes fierce. Eric pushed the throttle forward, sending the Starlance into a steep dive. The ship weaved between the mercenary vessels, narrowly dodging bursts of laser fire. The mercenaries closed in, their weapons flaring in quick, precise volleys. Leora operated the ship's turret, firing back with calculated shots that took out one of the pursuing ships. Explosions flared in the darkness as debris scattered through the rift. The remaining vessels tightened their formation, boxing the Starlance in. Eric cursed under his breath. They were being herded away from the gate. Desperation clawed at his thoughts, but then a glint of metal caught his eye, a small, sleek craft slipping between the mercenaries, firing at them from behind. The unexpected assault scattered the attackers, creating an opening. The comm channel opened again, this time with a different voice. "Eric, Princess Leora, head for the gate. I'll cover you." "Who is that?" Leora asked, her brow furrowing. Eric's eyes widened with recognition. "It's Lady Seraphine. She must have tracked us."
"We're not alone in this," Seraphine's voice crackled through the speakers. "Now go." Taking the opportunity, Eric angled the ship toward the gate. As the starlants drew closer, the gravity distortions grew more erratic, tugging at the ship as though the gate itself was trying to pull them in. The structure loomed large now, an obsidian archway that pulsed with dark energy, its surface covered in glowing glyphs that shifted and writhed like living things.
A larger warship emerged from the clouds of debris, its black hull emblazoned with Talion's insignia. The ship blocked their path, and a cold, authoritative voice resonated over the comm. "It's over, Eric. You won't keep me from what is rightfully mine." Talion's face appeared on the view screen, his eyes gleaming with the fervor of a man who had already won. "The gate will unlock powers beyond your understanding. Stand down, and I may yet show you mercy." Eric's jaw clenched as he glared at the screen. "You're not going to open that gate, Talion. We'll make sure of it." Leora's voice cut in, filled with a calm defiance. "My mother died to keep that power sealed. We're not going to let you use it to twist the galaxy to your will." Talion's gaze shifted to Leora, his expression darkening. "Your mother was a fool who clung to a broken order. You would do well to learn from her mistakes."
Eric ended the transmission, cutting off Talion's voice, and accelerated toward the gate. The warship's turret swiveled to fire, but Lady Seraphine's craft swooped in, intercepting the shots with a burst of countermeasures. Eric piloted the starlants through the chaos, drawing nearer to the gate's glowing arch. As they closed in, the glyphs on its surface flared brightly, resonating with the power within.
Eric and Leora disembarked at the base of the ancient structure, the gate's dark energy thrumming through the air like a heartbeat. The mercenaries landed nearby, disembarking and drawing weapons as Talion emerged from his warship. His presence was commanding, and there was an aura of conviction about him that bordered on madness. "Step aside, or be swept away," he declared, his voice echoing off the stone. "The gate will open, and I will shape a new order from its power." Eric stepped forward, his blaster aimed at Talion. "This isn't power you can control. It'll destroy you." Talion sneered. "That's where you're wrong." He raised a hand, and the mercenaries charged. The fight erupted in a frenzy of blaster fire and clashing energy blades. Leora moved with fluid precision, her training coming to life as she deflected attacks and fought alongside Eric. Amid the chaos, Talion strode toward the gate, his hand reaching for a crystalline device, a key forged by the Guardians themselves.
Leora broke free from the fray, sprinting toward him. "Stop," she shouted. "You don't know what you're doing."
Talion turned, his eyes filled with a dangerous mix of triumph and disdain. "You lack the resolve to do what must be done, Princess. You always did." He activated the key, and the gate shuddered with a deep, resonant hum. The glyphs ignited in a blaze of crimson light, and the archway's darkness seemed to twist, revealing glimpses of a swirling void beyond. The energy pulsed outward, knocking Leora and Eric to the ground. The gate began to open. A vast and terrible force poured through the gateway, a black tendril of energy coiling outward, drawn by Talion's will. His face glowed with elation as the power coursed around him. But then, as quickly as the triumph had appeared, his expression twisted into horror. The energy recoiled violently, dragging him toward the archway. His cries echoed as he fought to escape the pull of the void, his form beginning to dissolve into the swirling darkness. Eric struggled to his feet, grabbing Leora's arm. "We have to seal it now." The key lay on the ground near the gate's base, discarded in Talion's frantic attempts to free himself. Leora reached for it, her fingers wrapping around the crystalline device, as she summoned every ounce of will. She turned the key, and the gate's chaotic light flickered, the archway trembling as the void began to close. But the energy surged one last time, lashing out. It struck Leora, knocking her back as the gate collapsed inward, sealing with a thunderous crash. The force of the closure sent shockwaves through the structure, shattering ancient stone and hurling Eric and Leora across the ground. Dust and debris clouded the air, and for a moment there was only silence.
Eric found Leora, lying amidst the rubble, her breathing shallow but steady. He knelt beside her, his heart pounding in his chest. "Leora, are you all right?" he asked, his voice hoarse.
Her eyes fluttered open, and she gave a faint nod. We did it," she whispered, her voice weak, but filled with relief. He helped her to her feet, supporting her as they made their way back to the ship. The mercenaries had fled, and Talion was gone, consumed by the very power he had sought to command. Lady Seraphine's craft touched down nearby, and she emerged, her expression a mix of exhaustion and respect. "You did what the Guardians could not," she said as they approached. "You kept the gate closed." Eric met her gaze, a weary smile tugging at his lips. "Let's hope it stays that way." Leora glanced back at the ruins, the ancient structure now quiet and still. "My mother died to protect this secret," she said softly. "Now, we have to ensure that no one else ever tries to open that gate." Seraphine nodded, her tone grave. "The Guardians will watch over this place. But you, Princess, you must ensure that the legacy your mother left behind is not forgotten." As they boarded the Starlets, Eric felt a sense of finality settle over him. They had faced the darkness, and though the scars would remain, they had emerged victorious. Lyriath would recover, and the balance of power would shift once more. But now it would be on their terms. The stars stretched out before them as the ship lifted off, leaving the desolate ruins behind. There was still much to rebuild, much to heal, but Eric and Leora had reclaimed more than a legacy. They had forged a new path forward, a future where old secrets would no longer hold the galaxy in their shadow. As the Starlets soared into the vast expanse, Leora looked out at the endless horizon, a quiet determination in her gaze. "Whatever comes next," she said, "we'll face it together." And with that, they flew onward, toward a galaxy reborn.